Welcome to the Movement Standard and to our Movement Foundations program. My name is Brian, and this week we're going to look at the foundations to jumping and landing. This work represents some of the conditioning and sensing work that we include for lower body development, and it gives us a more holistic, well-rounded perspective for availability within the lower body. Of course, we all know how to jump and land. But what I found almost 100% of the time is that we all do it incorrectly. Our inefficiencies then lead to potential injuries, if not just a stagnation in our overall progress. I've seen this not only with myself, other students that I worked with, high-level athletes, and those athletes included in the ones that are jumping for a living. So if we reinstall the software and we download it, we take out all the viruses, and we put it back in a way that's as efficient and open as possible, we find that jumping and landing directly enhances our ability to gather this elastic energy and allows us to do it in a way that's efficient and long-lived. And the long-lived part, I think, is equally important because many of us, as we get older, we tend to jump less. And this is something that Moshe Feldenkrais actually pointed to in some of his research on vitality and aging. There were two aspects that he considered to be very much associative with those that he worked with that were of what he would call a low level of vitality. One of which was jumping. We quit jumping. We quit taking that locomotive leap, so to speak, and we go around, step over, do something other than using this elastic energy. And there could be many causal and associative factors here, one of which could be the lack of resiliency built through time that is, again, starting to break down the tissue from improper jumping and landing. The other is a mindset. It's staying young, vibrant, youthful, and including it as an option in locomotion. The second, if you're curious, is being on the floor more often. So as we get older, it seems to be less dignified for us to just hang out on the floor. We've got chairs, benches, couches, everything that promotes this lifting off the floor. And again, it's less socially accepted, at least in our Western cultures, to be hanging out and rolling around on the floor. Yet this is something that gives us a great sense of awareness of the hips, the low back, and the lower structures. So we've done floor work in the past. It's a reminder to touch the floor, get down on the floor daily. And as we're going to visit today, a reminder that jumping is something inherent in our ancestral physiology. This is deep-rooted. It's something that we all have access to, and it can enhance and improve our overall sense of well-being and vitality. To start with, we've got the structure of the body that needs to be readdressed and needs a period of adaptation to allow us to be able to be as resilient as possible. We talked about this in previous sessions, this ligamentous structure, the cartilaginous tissue, ligaments, tendons, the white tissue anatomically on a map of the body is less supported with this blood-rich environment. The reason it's white is because it's limited in blood supply. Because it's limited in blood supply, it has less ability to turn over. So there's less regenerative capabilities within these white tissues and structures, which means it takes even longer for them to adapt to whatever the demand is. In this case, the jumping work. This adaptation, most research points to taking somewhere between 9 to 12 months. So we could see how a consistency of work is needed for us to see real progress and change. And this is inclusive of all of the tissues, cartilaginous tissues of the body. Muscular tissue, 2 to 3 months. Cartilaginous tissue, 9 to 12 months. Bone, and again, if we think of bone, we always have this image of bone being white. Bone is white because it's limited in blood supply. But being that it's living tissue is still it's still receptive to the loading process, to adaptation. So bone can actually change. It just takes some time, and it takes consistent force. Not being forceful, but force being measured by load. So we know that, for example, if somebody is predisposed or is being diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, the solution for that is, or one of many, is loading. Loading of the tissue actually improves the density of the bone. So, what does that mean for the lower body and lower structure and for mobility in general? It means that for mobility to truly change, it's not a muscular endeavor, it's a ligamentous task. The ligamentous structure supports the ability for the muscular tissue to provide or allow for more elasticity. So as I build a more robust ligamentous structure, I also allow for more potential of the muscular structure. So 9 to 12 months if we're talking about deep change for an initial change of mobility in ligaments and tendons. If I've had an injury at one of those areas, I can also expect that amount of time to find true deep healing and regeneration. The second part of that is consistency. I have to be consistent. The load has to be varied and consistent enough so that adaptation takes place and continues to take place over time. And there are many reasons that we focus on and really push this programmatic aspect related to that, one of which is getting a sense for this adaptation in different parts of the body, how much is needed, how often we need to practice, etc., to continue this progression and development of the tissues and the nervous system. Okay, so if we move on to what ligamentous structures we need to upgrade here, it makes sense that the feet, the ankles, the knees, the hips, all of this from the bottom up is going to be most directly impacted by our jumping and landing. Now, part of the work to develop these structures is naturally tied into the practice of jumping and landing. We don't have to spend all day working the knees, working the hips, working the feet. We might find some of that to be valuable as an initial little warm-up, which we'll go through, but I want to get to practice as soon as I can. I don't want to spend my entire time rehabilitating or improving these structures just to do the thing. It makes most sense to do the thing. Granted, sometimes we need to back off just a bit to allow for these things to catch up. So we're going to go to the work we did last week, but this time jump in a much more improvisational way. We have these 4 aspects of the ankle: heel lifted, outer edge walks, inner edge walks, toes lifted. And we're just going to start on this outer edge, move around the space, and every 20, 30 seconds, switch into the next. So I've got now the heels elevated, and then I elevate the toes, and then I go to the instep, bringing my awareness and intention to the sensitivity in the feet. And now I can just kind of move around between all the different points, keeping my focus on relaxing through the entire body and really sensing into that tactility, the felt sense of connection with the feet on the floor. So we spend some time here. You may want a little more than me, or you may find that some days you need more or less than others. And you can, again, kind of bounce around, move the knees with it. Just really explore this warm-up to get into the feet and the ankles. Okay, now next thing we're going to do is just a light little heel lift, getting into that bottom aspect of the plantar fascia. Plantar fascia runs from this base of the heel all the way through the connection into the tarsals here, the bottom of the feet, the toes. And that often, if we're not strong in that fascial support, we lose the elasticity and maybe even create some lengthening that can be problematic. This is generally what happens with something like plantar fasciitis. We have this loss of structure and support of the foot. So just some light calf raises to get into that fascia and to really kind of warm things up. Now from here, we're going to add a little soft bounce, keeping still the toes on the ground, but it's faster. So we did the heel lift. Now we're doing a little bounce with the heel lift. And then we're going to add a little air into the feet, a little reactivity. And okay, good. So we start to get into the feet and the calves. We do a nice little resting squat here for the knees and the hips, just kind of exploring different potentials. Plenty of resting squat material on our YouTube page. We've done quite a bit here as well. The resting squat material is a meta theory in the sense that it's applicable in any number of variations or patterns that you can think of, dream of, come up with, or research. So we've done everything from tactical squat work, target taps, rotational squats. Really the imagination is the limiter here. So use your imagination to explore and sense what is needed to open up. If my inner hips are feeling tight, I can add some resistance to open them up in the squat. If I want to feel some elasticity in the lower legs, I might play around with some light bouncing. I might even do some bottom drops. Something that allows me to sense that elastic quality and just warm up the legs. It obviously improves mobility over time, and it gives us a general sense of where the lower body is on any given day. Okay, so again, we talked about jumping and landing as this gather and elasticity. First thing we're going to do is what we call a reactive bounce. This reactive bounce, very similar to our warm-up, just gives us both a target and this felt sense of gathering through the bottom of the foot, through this almost what we would call a stot. A stot is a stiff-legged gait. So the stot locks joints along the, or this idea of a stot rather, locks joints along the line to send the elastic energy into one place. In this case, mostly elastic energy is going to be coming from the foot and that plantar fascia. So very much like we did here, if I lock the joints, and I say lock loosely, it's not a super stiff leg position. It's locked in the knee and the hip so that I'm not in this overly springy or compressed position. It's a locked spring position. And then from here, what I'm going to do is use a target in front of me. Eventually, a goal is to have a target about shin high. But we start with something, this is about 2 inches. And I'm going to see if I can land on the target and then land on the floor. Target, floor, while keeping this elastic or reactive aspect within the feet. So, arms are relaxed. And I want to be as precise with my bounce and target as I can. Okay, now notice I'm not doing this. This is not reactive, this is bouncy, springy. We want it to pop right off, pop right off, pop right off. So pop, pop, pop. Again, this is prepping this for jumping and landing in many ways by upgrading this ligamentous structure in the Achilles, the back of the heel. So we store a ton of elastic energy and potential here. So this spring eventually allows us to move in a way that's much more efficient and less reliant on overusing other structures. Okay, pretty simple elastic bounce. Now we're going to get into some basic mechanics of jumping. So again, for many of us, we downloaded this incorrectly and unconsciously so. Doesn't mean that we can't still jump the way we've always jumped. It just means that it's likely if we upgrade and we switch to this new software, we're going to have much more improved sense of jumping and capabilities from jumping. So we're going to jump higher, further, in a more connected way. Part of this sequencing involves an understanding of what needs to happen with the upper and the lower body. So the first thing we're going to do is start with some basic arm swings and allow for this elastic, very soft movement in the arms from about, let's say, shoulder to chin high to whatever your back extended position is without hinging forward. So I want to stay tall and feel this elastic arm swing. Okay, so pretty simple, but you'll notice many hold tension and it doesn't flow so smoothly. It should be loose and elastic, open, without excess tension. Okay, so this bilateral arm swing we're now going to combine with a soft pumping of the legs that is going to be timed so that when the arms drop in their lowest position, the arms are down, the knees bend. They extend when the arms are in their back position. The knees bend again as the arms come down. They extend as I come back forward. So it's here. And you may have to try this in slow motion initially. Okay, so if we put that together with our arm swings, it looks something like this. Now I do want to be somewhat soft in the knees so that it's connected and not something like this, very rigid. I want it to be soft, loose, and upright through the torso. Notice I'm not doing this. Okay, I'm not hinging, I'm staying vertical and allowing that energy to translate through the entire body. Okay, so we've got this bilateral arm swing. Now the first phase of jumping is going to include a gathering of energy in this back position. If we think of a spring, it gathers energy when it comes into the top so that it can return it back down, and then it returns back out again. Many people, when they jump, they just compress and then go up. There is no loading phase. So we need to load, gathers more energy, compress, and then extend back out into the jump itself. So I have my swing. Now the loading phase looks like this. Extend. I want to extend in the knees, extend in the arms. This is my gather of energy. You'll notice my knees are extending. I'm up on the ball of foot. I'm getting as tall as I can and reaching as far back as I can. And the arms are allowed to continue swinging. So they're timed with the extension of both the arms and the legs. Okay, you also notice that these are not easy. This can be a session in and of itself, just going through these mechanics and building up some conditioning capacity here. Okay, so now we have this phase of the jump where we need to take that energy down. So we can imagine the jump here and then out. Just to show you so that you're aware what most people's jump looks like, it's something like this. Okay, so instead of here, after a loading phase, they're kind of combining both. They're trying to reach with the arms, and then they're jumping from this compressed position versus bringing the arms and legs in unison and then gathering through the rest of the loading and the extending. So I've got my load phase. Now I'm going to add a second phase, which is going to be to drop down into that lowest position. So I load, drop. I load, and I drop. I load, and I drop. Now, if that's too much for you, you can do an arm swing and drop as the arms come back down. And then eventually, once it feels coordinated, you can add the extended phase. You want to make sure that the knees are both extending and then compressing and then extending again. So in the back they extend, in the middle they compress, in the front they extend. Okay, last little element we're going to do here is add the last portion, which is the extension in the front. We're not going to do a full vertical jump. I just want to put a little bit of energy into the feet to come off the floor. So it looks like this. Extend, jump. Extend, load, jump. Extend, load, jump. Okay, and ideally, if we can, we continue the arms. Okay, plenty of work there, but we're going to add a little bit extra to this. So I've got the parameters of loading and jumping that we're going to take into some detailed jump, precision jump work. Precision jump is generally where we start, because if we build the quality of precision into or download that as the very first layer of jumping and landing, it improves all other qualities and layers of jumping and landing. Because then precision is softness, quietness, lightness, presence. There's a lot there to dramatically and immediately hone the quality. So we've got 4 different types of jumping, and in that, it's going to represent the options of which or how many feet we take off on, and which and how many feet we land on. So to look at the 4 options, I've got a 2-to-2 jump, which is what we were just doing. I've got a 2-to-1 jump, so I jump off 2 feet. I land on 1 foot. I've got a 1-to-1 jump. Notice how the arms are still continuous and swinging. And then I've got a 1-to-2 jump. So I jump off 1 foot, land on 2. Now there are hops and leaps and all these other types of jumping, but they're all jumps. So a jump includes all of them. Hopping would be 1 foot to 1 foot on the same side, and a leap would be a more open 1-to-1 jump. There are many different types of jumping, but this is the foot options with jumping. 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 2-to-2, 2-to-1. So what we're going to do to wrap this up is create some space that is roughly, to begin with, 4 of your own steps away from one another. So I've got 2 points with some tape on the ground. You can use chalk or objects. This is going to be my precision marker for jumping. We're going to go through 10 reps of each of the 4 options, so 40 total jumps. A rep counts only if it is precise and you can land with a 2-second hold on the landing. Now, we didn't talk as much about the landing, but the landing is going to be this absorption of energy, slight bend in the knee. Think of athletic ready position versus something where you're going into a deep squat or you're ponging or pinging off the top with no knee bend. So we want this athletic landing, hold it for 2 seconds, and then repeat for 10 total reps. So if we start with the 2-2, toes are gonna go on the line. If I can add my arm swings, great. And I find my 2-second landing, and then I return to the other side. Okay, now a landing like this doesn't count. A landing like this doesn't count. My landing needs to be dialed in, very sharp, and precise. So that represents 2-2. We've got 2-1. Now for some of you, the 2-1, you may have to shorten the distance. Any of the single leg stuff is definitely a little more challenging. So I still want the same rules of precision to apply here. 1-2. So I have one leg behind me. It comes through. I land on 2. And then 1-1, opposites. So take off on my right foot, land on my left foot. Take off on my left foot, land on my right foot. Okay, so we've got the 4 represented possibilities of jumping. We've got the precision of the landing. We've got the mechanics of jumping. There's a lot here, very potent, very simple. I often say this, don't let the simplicity fool you. If you don't or can't access these, that is the direction that you need to go for wholeness. Meaning, the things that aren't us, the things that we can't do, are the things that we need to do to round out potential. So as you explore this material, making notes of where you feel exposed or where you feel limited, and then spending a little bit more focal time there. Putting the reps in, staying consistent. Again, all of that will provide within the written programming, but don't let this work fool you. This is, again, another meta skill that can be applied in so many different ways, and this is just the beginning of understanding how these can translate into other parts of your practice. So thanks for letting us share. Enjoy your week of practice. We look forward to hearing from you. Let us know if there's something specific you want to learn or see, and we'll see you next week.